Welcome. Today we'll be looking at the SPC Programming and Operation. This is going to be a follow-up from last week's SPC Installation video. So if you haven't already watched it, please go and have a look. We'll wait for you, so check it out now and come back to us. Okay, it's good to have you back. Let's get started. As already mentioned last week, we can have a variety of ways that we can program the panel. You can program it through the keypad. You can program it through any web browser when connected to the same network as the panel. You can also program the panel using the SPC Connect Pro software, either over the same network or directly to the panel using a USB cable. Also, if the panel is connected to the internet, you can program the panel from any web browser, anywhere, using the SPC Connect Cloud portal. So today we'll be using the web browser, but I'll also show you a couple of functions using the keypad to show you the ease of setting up the system. So stay with us now. Okay, so where we finished off last time was we really only had programmed the IP address into the panel. So let's start up our browser and type in that IP address that we programmed in, and we're presented with a sign-on screen. The only user or code that's currently programmed into the system is what we call the engineer or the installer code, and the default code is 1111. When we log in, we're presented with basically I suppose a status screen of how the alarm system is currently set, and that is currently the system is disarmed or unset. We can arm it by pushing the full set button. We can see that there is nothing preventing us from setting the system, and we have a zone isolation here, that zone actually of not wired into the system, so it's come up as isolated. We can have a look at the alarm tab, and it will tell us at the moment that there is no active alarms in the system. If there was, we could clear them directly from here. By looking at this status screen, we get a good indication of the current situation with the panel. Cabinet tampers are okay, mains power, battery power and charge are all okay. Our X-bus, we have 4 devices, all of the tampers and troubles are okay on there. We can see our IP address here. I do have a GSM modem connected, and that's in modem 1 slot, so we'll enable that as we go along as well. We can see the status of all of our devices. I have no expanders, zone expanders on this system. I do have 3 keypads that we can look at, and we can drill down and see the firmware version, the voltage, and any soft alarms. They're all okay here. Same with our door controllers. I have a 2-door controller. We can drill down into that and see much the same information. We can get an overview of all of our inputs on the system. So as I said, straight out of the box after we did our wizard, the system had already enabled all of our zones, put them all on area 1 and given them some default information. But we'll get certainly into that in a little bit more detail shortly. X plus zones is just the zones other than on the main PCB. We've only got two, which is our door contacts on both of our doors that we have set up. And we can see our two doors here, the state of the door position switch and the read switch on the unit. And from here we can momentarily unlock, lock down or unlock those doors. Straight out of the box, we enabled SPC Connect, which is the cloud service. If we click over here to FlexC, which is the protocol that SPC Connect uses, you can see that SPC Connect is online. We do have to register our details and set up a free user account at spcconnect.com, but it is already talking to the cloud service. So by having a valid IP address or DHCP set up, and by putting in a gateway and DNS server over an existing internet connection, it will automatically connect after it's powered up. And we can see a variety of other system alerts and their status. So our system is sitting in a pretty good state at the moment. Our log file will give us full history on everything that's happened on the system. Access log will give us a full history on all the access information. Modem log, any calls that the modems have made. Users, we will come back to. We can set up it has no users straight out of the box. We can set up our users and profiles, which we'll do a little bit later. Or we can change our engineer pin by clicking on this. But what we want to do is start some basic programming to get our system up and running. We do that by changing it from a soft engineer up the top here to a full engineer. Once we do that, we get a couple of extra menu options down the side: configuration, communications, and file. We want to start with the configuration menu. Now, we don't have to do anything in the same or similar order to what I'm doing here. Anything can be done in any order that you wish, but I'm going to do it in the most logical progression that we want for our installation, just so I don't have to keep going back and updating various things. We're going to set up a system that has two areas, an office and a warehouse, and we're going to set up a keypad that just does the office, a keypad that just does the warehouse, and a keypad that can do both. And we'll set up a couple of users, an office user, a warehouse user, and a manager for that. But before we get into it, let's just now have a look at our system options. There are loads of options and things we can do all the way through here. I'm only highlighting or changing the things that I want to change for my installation. It would take us far too long. We'll be here all day if we went over, the vast majority of the options that are on this system. So I'm just doing the most basic functions. As we go through, you'll no doubt see other options that may be of interest to you, but I'm just doing the ones that are applicable for my simple, straightforward install. So the first thing that we said, we did want areas. So areas here are enabled. We can zoom down and have a look at other things. We won't be using part set, which is like a stay mode. This panel has two part set modes. If we did, we could give them meaningful text like upstairs, downstairs, stay mode, garage, workshop, etc. And when we arm a part set A or a part set B, it will only arm the zones that we wish to in our case. But we do want to change our battery capacity. I've put a 7 amp hour battery in, and the maximum current that I wish that to draw, I'm going to say 2000 milliamps is a good start. This bell on first is important, that we want the bell to go off the second that any zone that is an alarm zone goes into alarm. If we did want to change all of our end of line resistors in one hit, we can pick the value from here. I'm going to leave it on the default, and we can update any zone with any value that we wish. Being a good old Australian alarm panel or an Australian installation, I always like setting always show state, so the keypad will always show whether it's armed or disarmed, and will show any open zones. So any zones that are open on the panel, the keypad will scroll all of those as well. We can change our pin code length. 4 is all that I want here. We've got a couple of doors as well. We'll quickly run through that also when we get to that area. But if you're using prox cards that have a site code, if you want to ignore the site code, you can click this option, or I can show you where you enter the site code when we get to that area. Card formats, by default, everything is enabled. So any card format that the SPC panel can use has automatically been set up, and when you badge your card, it will automatically pick the right format for use. You don't have to do anything about that at all. So let's continue scrolling down here. And that's it. Once we're happy with these settings, hit save, and then we can move on. We do have our system timers. So our bells, internal, external, chime, etc. We don't need to change anything. I'm quite happy with those as they are. Maybe the only thing that I would typically change would be, there's an option here that talks about dialer delay. If you were using the dialer, the delay period, by default, it's 30 seconds. I like changing that to 0, so if there is an alarm, it will dial immediately. And that's about it. Hit save on that. Identification. When you install a panel, this goes nowhere, it's just for reference. You know, it might be, ABC factory, and put in the date that you installed it, more for reference than anything else. We can put in our details. Jeff Security, and you can contact me on that. If we want to display this on the keypad, we can click this, and it will scroll now between Jeff Security, phone number, open zones, and time and date. For our application, I'm going to leave that off. We can update and save this. Let's just confirm that the information that we put in was correct when we did the wizard on PowerUp. Got the right location, a commercial panel. In my case, it should have been unrestricted for Australia, and save. Confirm that the clock is okay. Those details look fine to me, and we don't normally have to change this. 3 languages inbuilt in the panel. There's a multitude of languages we can download to the panel. I only understand English, so I'm going to stick with that. And when the keypad is in idle mode, it will use English as the preferred language. Or we can pick last used. So if somebody that we'd set up is French and they use the keypad last, it could stay in French until someone else with a different language came in and used. So we'll keep it as it stands there. Before we set up our areas, I'm going to set up a calendar. So immediately from here we can add, and although we probably won't use this on my installation, I'll show you how to do it, and therefore when we go through the various sections of the panel, you'll see how the calendar is applicable. So I'm going to say, let's say for this one, will be Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. You see here lots of dates. It's telling us where we are in the yearly calendar, and you can see that there is a selection of type 1, 2 or 3, or none for that matter. we'll go down the bottom here and pick week types. So when is the panel unset, for example? So we pick 9 to 5, so let's pick 9 AM and set at 1700. We can pick a multiple of start-stop times for each day. If we're happy with that, we can just hit copy all. And we could say, oh, we don't want Saturday. We can get rid of those. So now we have our Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. We can save that and go back. It's all on type 1. So every week type for the remainder of this year, that calendar is applicable, and we'll hit save on there. If we want more calendars, we can add additional ones, or we can, and you'll see this word quite often on a lot of these menus, replicate. It will start a new calendar with the settings that we've just created, and then they can be modified and saved as a new calendar. So after our calendars, we want to look at our areas. Because we've picked areas, one area will come up by default. I'm going to call that Office. I'll save that. I'm going to edit my Office profile, entry time, exit time, entry time 2, exit time, and there's a bunch of options here. Although we don't need them, sometimes you'll see these part set options are on. I would turn those off if you are not using part set options. And we have a variety of link options. I'm not going to go through those at the moment. I'm just going to save that. Go back to my areas. I'm going to add a new area, and we're going to call that Warehouse. I'll leave all of these the same just for the moment and hit save. And I want to do these in order, so let's go back to Office and we'll edit. Down the bottom here, we have the ability to link our Office area to our Warehouse area, or in fact, any combination of areas that we have on our system. I don't want any linking. I want the Office to turn on and off totally independently from the Warehouse. So it's basically two independent alarm systems using the same panel. But if we did select some of these options, you can see the text for each option here. Full set this area, so the Office area, when all linked areas are full set. So if this was turned on, whenever the Warehouse is turned on, the Office would turn on. Full set all linked areas when this area full sets. So in this case, if I turn the Office on, the Warehouse would turn on. There's a bunch of options here that you can see that we can link between the Office and the Warehouse in our case quite considerably. But we're not going to worry about that. Remember our calendar that we did. We could set up our calendar, check if this area should full set according to calendar. So in our case, we could have this area arm at 5 p.m. Monday to Friday, but it won't disarm. Someone has to come in and physically disarm it. Or we could have both, or of course the reverse. I'm not going to put a calendar on arming. Reporting options here, you're never going to use, so we'll continue down. And that would be all that I want to set up on my Office. Let's have a quick look at our Warehouse. We could change the times here. I'm happy with that. I'm going to turn that option off. I don't know why that was on, but anyway. I don't want any of my linking. Don't want a calendar. And I'm happy with that. So now we've got our two areas. Let's look at our inputs. Now, if I have a quick look at my inputs up on this top tab, it will show me all of my inputs throughout the entire system. So in my case, I have my 8 zones on the panel, and I have There's basically 4 inputs, 2 on each door, on my door controller. If I had other I/O expanders, they would all be listed here as well. We can change the description, the type, the area, and the attributes from here, but this basically is an overall view of the system. We want to go in, do our hardware, and do our inputs and outputs directly from the PCB. So most of my zones are 4K7, 4K7. So we can see here the selection of single, dual, and triple end-of-line resistors that we have to pick from. Select the resistor for the zone, give it a name, assign it a type. Typically the two of general use here is entry-exit and alarm. So for an entry-exit zone, pick the area. Then we can have a look at the attributes that are applicable to this zone based on this entry-exit type. And the attributes will change dependent on the type. So from here, we can exclude things for part set areas that we're not using. Can the user inhibit this zone? So the default option is yes. Is it normally open? And there's a variety of other options down here. We can also associate a calendar with this as well. So we can limit a zone by a time and date also, not just an area. In our case, we don't want to change anything here. I just wanted to show you what options are available and see how that differs from an alarm zone. So if we have our main entry PIR, we could make it an entry-exit zone, but in my case, I'm going to make it a handover zone. So I'm going to call it an alarm on the office area, and we have this top option here, access. If checked, then the alarm will not be generated by a zone opening if either the entry or the exit timer is running. So basically, this access option turns this particular zone into a handover. That is, it goes off instantaneously if it's the only zone that's in alarm, or if an entry timer is running, i.e. someone has come in the front door, then it will not go into alarm. There's a variety more options that you see here. The inhibit option is probably the only other one that we'll leave. We'll hit save now, go back, and we can continue down this way. I'm just going to change a couple of the zones to a different area. If we're happy with the way that this is set up in our text, we can hit the save. By default, our 6 outputs that are on the main PCB. The first high power output is an external bell, or set up as an external bell, our internal siren, our strobe, and then there's 3 others that are set up. The strobe is the only relay output, and these are low-powered transistor outputs. And by default, they're set up for full set or armed, any alarm, or when an alarm has been confirmed, that is, 2 zones have gone off within a certain period of time. From here, we can also test. We can turn on or off that to test to make sure that we've wired it correctly. Once we've given it a name, if we were changing it, or let's just have a look and have a look what options we've got. Let's say we don't want full set. We can now change the type. We can physically turn that output off. We can pick a system function. So system, when the entire system, that is when both the office and the warehouse is armed, this will give an output. But we might say, well, no, only when the office is full set. that I want this output to work. Or potentially you want that output to be a zone follower. So at any time that the main entry PIR goes into alarm, that output will fire and then reset when that zone goes secure. Or we could pick a door, that when one of our doors has one of these criteria, access granted for example, that output will also fire. So a significant amount of options for our outputs on here. Once we've set up our outputs, we'll have a real quick look at our so from our controller, which is our main PCB, we go along to the X bus, which is everything that is sitting on the communication bus. And we can see here that we don't have any zone expanders. I have 3 keypads, so we'll quickly have a look at each one of these. So this particular keypad, we can give it a name or a location. We can have the backlighting on, off, or when the key's pressed, we'll leave that as default. Indicators on, setting state will turn on, buzzers key press. We can also turn on or off this particular keypad, so when it's outside the time zones, the keypad just will not operate for anyone as well. Where do we want it? In our case, we want this one to be, it can only arm and disarm the office, and of course it's located in the office. And we'll hit save. Actually, let's just give it a name so we know, and we'll hit save. This one here, how about we make that one the warehouse? Scroll down the bottom here, again, setting state's probably a good thing to have. Now this is the slimline keypad with the touch display. The options here give us the ability of uploading a logo, so a 2-color image that will sit and be displayed on the keypad at all times. If we are using a logo, it also comes with an analog clock. Do we want that turned off because we're using a logo, or do we move it around to the left, center, or right? That will be dependent on how you've set it up. In our case, we don't have a logo, we'll keep that turned off. There's also the ability, well I might as well mention it while I'm here, this human icon. There is a little man icon which is an LED, it's either on or off for this keypad and the next keypad. That LED can operate with any function that we call a mapping gate. So we can select any function on this system or any combination of functions, and when that happens, that human icon can light up, and then when it resets, it can turn off. So it's basically an indicator that can be freely programmed. From here, we can actually adjust the volume of all of these things. We're quite happy with that. We do have on this slimline keypad and the compact keypad, the ability of it to talk to us. So voice enunciation will give the ability of telling us to disarm, to arm. When there's troubles, it will speak any of those conditions out. So in our case, this one is in our warehouse, and we only want it to operate the warehouse. The last keypad, I'm just going to call it all. Setting state. We'll go down the bottom here, and we don't need to change it. So if we have a code that operates both the office and the warehouse, then we can select office or warehouse here. So we can go save. Let's have a look at our door controllers. Just very quickly, our door controller is a 2-door controller. It has 2 doors. From here we can determine or give it a description of the zone that's on that door. So it could be office door, it will be entry exit. We can give it an attribute like we had before. It's end of line resistance values, and our door egress button. Sorry, this is for our switch. Is this door a normally open switch or not? No, it's dual 4.7K. Our door release, do we have one? Are we using just, let's say, a normally open set of contacts for your door release? If that's the case, don't pick an end alone resistance value, and the DRS is normally open and goes short to open the door. We can give it a reader location on where it is, office or warehouse. So it's in the office door in this case. We can also program with the ability of these mapping gates again to activate the green LED or the red LED for various functions. A standard function might be that you might have it so the red LED stays on when the system is armed and green stays on when it's disarmed, for example. That can be set up and programmed from here as well. Is it an entry or exit reader? And how do we want this to work? The options that we have here, if we have a reader that has a PIN code on it as well, we can activate the, in our case I do, we can put in the PIN code for the user or badge the card. Do we want to use the system to arm and disarm the system? So when you badge your card, if the office was armed, we can disarm it automatically. And if we badge our card twice, so dual badging, we can arm it from outside. So we'll say yes for that. We'll allow them to force arm it in case there was something open, and we can scroll down the bottom here. Typically, I would say that's all we need to worry about. But there is an option here that I would always select if we are using a reader that has a keypad on it. And what this allows us to do is by using the star or hash, or ours have got a tick or a cross, when you press the tick or the cross and then badge your card or punch in your code, it will arm the system. So this dual badging will no longer work, which sometimes can be a bit of a pain, that somebody accidentally badges twice and arms the system, or they don't know if they're badged twice and they don't really get an indication whether the area is armed. This is the perfect means that you can badge your card as much as you like and it'll just open the door. But if you push a button, then badge your card or enter your code, that area will arm. We can give it our door access times here if we want, and associate our door with our calendar. When do we want the door locked? And locked in our case means it will not accept any card holders. The door is locked down. Or of course when the door is unlocked, so you can just walk through. We're not going to use either of those. We're going to hit save. The same is applicable for door 2. So I'll just quickly set that up as well. Let's call that warehouse. Entry, exit, it's all good. Door release, normally open. Reader location in the warehouse. Unset, full set, forced. And this too has a keypad on it. Setting, prefix, and save. Now they're the absolute basic things that you would need to do to set up your system, other than users, which we haven't done just yet. Before we get on to users, typically this alarm will be communicating somewhere. In our case, out of the box, our FlexC cloud service is already set up and working. So by setting up an online account and then using our app, we can arm and disarm it, get alarms, for example, to our mobile or on a web page using the cloud service. So all of that's good. If we are going back to a control room in some way, shape or form, then we want to set up the connection for them. If it was going back over this protocol and over IP, we can just add another path to a control room that is running the FlexC software, and it will communicate directly over the internet, over IP. In our case, we've actually got a modem, and it's a GSM modem, and it's in modem slot number 1. So we'll just enable this. We'll configure it. It will be 3G. The thing that it will require, and the only thing other than the country, is a valid APN for the SIM card that you put in. For me, it's telstra.wap, and we can save that. Unfortunately, my SIM card has no credit, so I can't show you how it works, but I can show you here that it's in fault. I've got no credit on the unit, but it is ready to rock and roll other than me putting some money on the card. So if we were going back to a control room using Contact ID, we would go into Reporting, Analog Alarm Receiving Center, hit Add, give it a name of the control room, so ZZZ Control, the account number that you've been given, the format that it's talking in. Is it your primary or your backup? It's primary in our case. Give it your 1300 number, your backup 1300 number, or whatever other number that you've got. Dial attempts, test calls every 24 hours, add. Now, in our case, because we only had the one communication path, it automatically has assigned this to go out over our modem that we've set up. So straight away, this will report over our GSM modem as account number 2345 to that phone number. We can also use that GSM modem as a backup path within our communication, IP communication methods that we have here. So in the case of our SPC Connect, it's saying that currently it is only going out over our Ethernet. We could add an additional path, which will be over our GSM. We'll leave these details the same because that's the account code on my SPC Connect account service. That is the address that it goes to, and that's the port that it works in, but it now will be going out over mobile data. And we can also select a category for that communication. So by default, Cat4 modem says that it has a 60-second polling time. It will poll out or time out after 3 minutes. If it was the active ATP or alarm transmission protocol. If it's the backup, which in our case it will be, that will mean that it will poll every 24 hours to make sure that that connection is still alive. And after 24 hours and 30 minutes, we'll time out and let us know that if there was an issue. So in our case, it is our backup. We'll hit save. When we go back here, you'll see now that we have two means or two paths of communication for our cloud service. The primary is over Ethernet, and if that failed, our backup is over our modem 1 data connection. This will time out and go to fault after a couple of minutes to say that it can't get out. But you can see here we have multiple methods of connecting or getting a connection out. So once we've set up those things, the best place to go would be under our status display. We can have a look at our inputs, and we can see here our zones, and it's telling us now our end-of-line resistance value, and in our case it's saying good and it's in green. So based on the end-of-line resistor values we've programmed into the system for each zone and the state of each zone, this is telling us now that our resistance value is good and it is currently sitting at 4.7K. We must have programmed it correctly because that input is closed and I know it's secure, and it's in a normal status. If we scroll down here, we can see that zone 7, which is currently not wired, is set up as a fire zone. It has infinite resistance, i.e. that zone is open. The input is disconnected, and I've currently got that in isolate. I can de-isolate it. So what I should do is go back to my configuration, go to my zone 7. I could do a few things. I could change the end alone resistance value or leave it. But ultimately what's needed is for this to come up as unused. We can save this, go back to our status, look at our inputs. That zone now does not appear on our listing. So I can see that each of our zones here are okay. We can have a look at the state of our doors and see that the door is closed, door is in normal. We can momentarily open a door and it will lock after the access time. We can see the state of our FlexC connection, and this is still initializing and hasn't gone into fault just yet. And again, our system faults that we looked at before. So the only thing left to do from a basic setup is add some users. Before we add some users, we need to have a look at these user profiles. The system comes with these 4 automatically set up. What I'm going to do is leave those 4, but copy them for our own purpose. So let's just say our standard user. I'm going to zoom down the bottom and hit replicate. And I'm going to call that office user. They will only have access to the office. Now here we could give them a time period of 9 to 5 if we're really keen, so we might do that. What are they allowed to do? Can they unset the panel? Part set A, part set B we're not using, so let's remove those out of the equation. Can they turn the panel on, arm it? Yes. Can they force set it? Well, maybe for a standard user, no. All the zones are required to be closed. Can they restore and isolate a zone if there's an issue? I'm going to say yes for now. So if there is an issue, they've got to manually go in and inhibit a zone before they can arm their system. A variety of other options down the bottom here. None of these are ultimately important for our perspective. Do we want them to be able to open or unlock doors from the keypad? It's not a big deal. If they've got a card or a code, they can go to the card reader and use it. But typically you would probably turn that on. Can they do a belt test, a walk test, etc.? Don't need to change any of those. And by default, what doors do they have access to? And by default, they come up with all of the doors, and there is no time limit. If we set an office user only has access to the office, we can turn off access to the warehouse door. And let's go save. We could go down the bottom. Let's go back a step. Our office user. We could now replicate that and call that warehouse. So they've got access to the warehouse, and we could give them the same constraints that we gave the other person, but of course this time no access and no time limit in this case, and save. If we wanted to now add a manager, we could add another, let's do it from here. I'll add or replicate this manager profile, and we'll call it management. So they have access to both doors, no calendar settings. We'll turn off these two because we're not using those functions, and it just comes up with an extra menu option, which if it's not there, it's a bit confusing. So they can unset, full set, force set, delay, auto set, restore, inhibit, isolate, etc., etc., etc. Have access to both doors all the time, and we can hit save. If you were using Wiegand style cards with a site code, this is where you enter the site code for each of those user profiles. We're using MyFair cards, using DesFire technology. They do not have a site code, so it's not required. And we'll hit save. So now we have a variety of profiles, our office user, our warehouse, and our management. We can delete these other ones if we needed to, but I'm going to leave them here for now. We're going to add a new user. And I'm just going to call him Office 1. Give him a high security PIN code. And we're going to give him, you can give him multiple profiles and it'll be a combination of each of these. But in our case, Office user is all that we need. You can give him a limit as to when his card will work to and from. You can give access, let's say, to a patrol guy that only allows access after an alarm has been generated. If you were using access control, you could put in a card number here for him to operate. We haven't got to that stage yet, so we're just going to go save. We'll go back to user, add a new user. This will be warehouse guy, and his code, another high security code. No date limit. He's not a standard user, he's a warehouse user, and save. Add a new user, manager, new code, and management. Save. So now we've added our 3 users into the system. So very straightforward to add a user. If we go back and have a look at these user profiles just once more for, let's say, Office, you'll see now that, we've still got all of these options, but down the bottom, it will now list all of the users that are associated to this profile, which means if we change this profile, it will automatically update all of the users associated with that. From here also, we can go to Engineer and we can update or change our engineer pin from the 1111 to, a different value, obviously. Things that we haven't looked at, and we will cover probably in another video, are most of the options under the Advanced tab here. Under the Advanced tab, we have things that we can set up that we call triggers. A trigger can be pretty much any function on the panel or any combination of functions on the panel. And then they're linked to a thing called a mapping gate. A mapping gate is something then that can be added to the alarm. In other words, it can operate an output. It can operate the LEDs as we've seen or I've shown you on a card reader. It can do a variety of things, and mapping gates are just about everywhere on the system. If we went back, for example, and just had a look at our keypad as one of a dozen potential examples, everything on the system has pretty much got this option of a mapping gate. So it would be possible that under a variety of conditions that we could have that particular keypad stop working totally when a series of events happen, or have it work when a series of events happen, or have an output fire, or have an area arm, or pretty much anything that can be done within this system using a mapping gate. Mapping gates can also be used in what we call a virtual zone. A virtual zone is basically a mapping gate or a bunch of triggers that will trigger a virtual zone, and that virtual zone will act just like any other zone in the system. We can program it as alarm, entry, exit, etc., and have that report back to our control room. So anything on this system we could have set up as a virtual zone, and then it work as any other zone in the system. So it makes it quite flexible in the features and functions that it can do. We do know that the SPC panel has both audio and video verification inbuilt. Audio is accomplished via the microphones in some of the keypads, and video is assigned by suitable cameras that can be programmed or added into the SPC panel. Then, using a combination of the audio and video, we set up a verification zone which uses the audio from one of the things and then the video if we've set that up. And then when we go back to our hardware and we go to our attribute on any zone, there was a verification tab, and we can assign a camera and a microphone to a zone which is, in close proximity to either of those two things. Then on alarm, it will, in the case of the app, send you the video and you can listen in to the audio. And if a control room is using our software, it can too see the audio and video from that system. Using the SPC cloud service, it also uploads the audio and the video to the cloud so it can be reviewed at a later stage. So that's pretty much it for now. We can cover more, and we'll have a look at the advanced tab in a future video. But certainly for now, I think that gives you a good understanding and appreciation of the ease and simplicity of programming the SPC system and accessing it. If you do need to know more, please be in contact. In the show notes, you'll see some various links to give you more information. But for now, thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.